too many letters. Is it? Are they stealing everything that there is to know about our youth in this country and using it to subvert the future of the United States or not? That's what I don't understand. That was the whole idea. Was it? Has it been happening? And if so, then it doesn't matter whether it helped win an election. It's an insidious thing that probably shouldn't be around. Which is it?
Well, one thing that we don't know is what is happening in those national security briefings. So when the law was passed, a number of lawmakers were skeptical. They went in and got an intelligence briefing and came out and said, I'm supporting this law. President Trump has seen those briefings. We have not seen them. So we don't know exactly what's happening, but it is certainly true that the CCP has shown that they are interested and active in manipulating public discord in the United States, and they could also be surveilling people. Now, the American public seems to shrug this off. 170 million people don't mind having a surveillance device in their pocket, it seems, but they've not seen all the evidence. So we haven't seen it. Members of Congress have. Both President Biden and President Trump have seen that information.
Nikki, is it possible that all the phones are sending info to the drones? Do you know?
It is possible that they are violating terms of service from the app stores and collecting things on all of our phones. Anyone in Washington, where I'm based, who works in national security does not touch TikTok. They believe that it could scrape information. I think most teenagers don't care.
Right. They don't have a whole lot. I don't know what China's going to get from looking at what teens talk about. Not a whole lot. They probably, if they do look at it, they probably say, we don't have to do anything. The U.S. is going to happen anyway. Nikki, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say one last thing is President Trump has said over and over that one of his big concerns is this is a boon to Instagram. Mark Zuckerberg is the biggest beneficiary of this ban. Everybody on TikTok can switch immediately to Instagram Reels, and so there's a reason we're seeing him on bended knee this week. I think he's making a case for the ban to go forward.
Well, so Trump, he doesn't know what to do at this point. Now he likes Zuckerberg, so I don't know. That he's he may be rethinking the whole position. It's interesting, enemy of my enemy analysis on all these things.
Yeah,
that's where we are. All right, thank you.
Send professional invoices and get paid faster with the QuickBooks mobile app. Know when they've been viewed and know when you're paid. Anytime, anywhere.
If you can organize a closet, I'm going to show you how in just 5 days you can acquire the skills to potentially earn more than your day job using a
your new baby.
Thank you very much. A lot's changed since we last spoke, actually.
Yeah.
But of the broad spectrum of what you announced last night, new graphics cards, new chips, actually, technically in the automotive space, products and services on the software side, which is the single most important for NVIDIA's future?
They're all important. You know, it's hard. It's all important. It's hard to pick your favorites. You know, we announced 3 chips. We announced a brand new AI, a world foundation model, and first of its kind, and we announced our work in 3 areas in robotics.
Right.
And they're all important. And you know, the thing, of course, we announced a brand new Blackwell RTX, and it has a new AI technology called Neuro shaders, and we're combining artificial intelligence and classical computer
Let's
graphics.
go to RTX, the new RTX.
Yeah.
We've become so accustomed to your story being dominant in a market for high-performance GPUs, server racks, data centers. This is going back to your roots. It's in the desktop context. There's one right there.
And what we've done is we've fused artificial intelligence and computer graphics together. And the images that we're generating today wouldn't be possible if not for the fact that we're using computer graphics to create beautiful pixels, and then use artificial intelligence to amplify that capability. For example, you know, out of 4 frames I was talking about yesterday, 33 million pixels or so in 4K. Out of that 33 million pixels, 2 million pixels were computed. The other 31 million pixels were generated by AI.
In other words, the AI predicts what it thinks the pixel should be.
That's right, yeah. The ultimate generative AI.
But what was interesting for me is the focus, again, was away from the graphics cards, away from Blackwell that underpin it, and Cosmos. We probably don't have time to explain in full detail Cosmos, but you call it a world foundation model.
Cosmos is for the physical world what ChatGPT is for words and text. That's the easiest way to think about that.
Okay, so in other words, it's model text input, but
intelligence for AVs and for robotics, it brings in a lot of business for us, of course.
There's an academic point of tension here, if I may. Elon Musk is a customer of yours, and Tesla, their theory or practice is based on real-world data gathered through vision.
Yeah.
Does the synthetic data underpinning of Cosmos kind of contradict that?
It doesn't replace, it augments. And so you should collect as much world data as you can. Of course, collecting world data is very expensive, and Elon has a great advantage because number one, his AI factory for his cars is fantastic. Has a lot of NVIDIA gear in it. His AV algorithms is incredible. It's the best in the world, and he has a very large fleet of cars on the road that allows him to collect a lot of data. And so I think he has just a phenomenal position, and he's been working on this for a long time, and so he's going to be in a great position to take advantage of it.
Well, may I ask you at this juncture, he's clearly influential in this upcoming administration, but he also positions Tesla as a leading AI and robotics company.
Yeah, very.
How does that bode for NVIDIA, Elon Musk's influence of President-elect Trump, and also the upcoming administration's kind of attitude towards AI?
I don't know the attitude towards AI. I know Elon's attitude towards AI, and he's very optimistic about its future, and obviously he's working on some of the most important AI areas. XAI is working on foundation, cognitive intelligence AI. Tesla's working on autonomous vehicles, and Optimus is for humanoid robotics. These three areas of AI are the three most important areas of AI, and so I think he's working on exactly the right things.
You kind of positioned AI, NVIDIA's position in the supply chain for physical AI, robotics, autonomous driving. Explain it a bit more, the role you see NVIDIA playing.
Well, we're a core technology company, and so we build the foundational computing platforms. We're also full stack, and so we develop the necessary algorithms, the necessary AI technologies, and then we put it out to the industry for them to adopt it and turn it into end market solutions. We're a computing platform company.
So you're on stage and you're surrounded by, I think, a dozen humanoid robots, which is nice for you. When will I be here at CES in Las Vegas and actually have...
There's some robots right now.
No, but in real terms, you must have a timeline that you see real-world commercial deployment of the technology you outlined last night.
It depends on use case. I would say
we see first use case.
The first use case will probably be in manufacturing. You know, there's estimates tens, if not 100 million jobs that are workers that are. The world is short of workers, and aging population, declining birth rates, and so I think the world needs a lot more workers. Robotics is one of the best ways for us to supplement all of that and help companies recover the lost revenues on the one hand and drive productivity, which reduces inflation for the world on the other hand. And so I think robotics is going to be very important to that. In different areas, you could have they'll probably deploy to manufacturing first because they obviously need it most.
Which you see as a ginormous potential market, addressable market.
It's a $50 trillion industry that wants to grow and needs to grow.
Sorry to interrupt you, Jensen. I think the thing that Wall Street's struggling with this morning, among many things, is DGX. They understand the investment there, that trains the foundation models. In terms of NVIDIA's business model, what you outlined last night, Cosmos, and then later on the inference side, how physical AI helps grow your business from there.
Drives DGX growth.
Just simple as that.
Yeah, as simple as that. I think if you just look at simply like that, we have 3 computers, and 2 of the computers, DGX and Omniverse, drives enormous amount of data that is necessary to train the AI models.
Right.
And so Omniverse creates the data that we then use to train AI models. The training is what drives DGX sales, and is the single most important technology force of our time. And it's really about we're at the beginning of that. And in the future, every single data center will be driven by AI and the video game industry. On the one hand, for developers, it's going to reduce the cost of creating the content. On the other hand, all of the characters that are in the games are going to be smart characters in the future. So every time you interact with them, they're going to be interacting with you in a much more intelligent way. And so the games are going to be more interesting, the characters are going to be more interesting, the content development cost is going to decline, and that's going to be, if they can afford computers and they would like to have a companion that helps them do AI, this is the way to do it.
Can I just clarify something on it? I think you said on stage, Mac OS, Linux, and Windows, but the communication said just Linux.
No. Whatever computer you use, you're literally enjoying how it's going to be used. It's sitting right there, and you just connect to it wirelessly like it's your personal cloud.
I promised the audience I'd
Yeah.
clarify that because we're excited.
Yeah.
We're running short on time. President-elect Trump has been speaking during the course of the conversation. Example in the autonomous driving context. That's happening in China. Like, they are doing a lot on robotics. So I'm going to ask you about tariffs. You know, it's likely this coming administration will be as restrictive on technology export, and tariffs will be a function. How have you prepared for that, Jensen?
Whatever the administration ultimately decides, we'll give them as much insight as we can from our perspective, and I'm sure that the administration will make the right moves that's in the best interest of our country.
2025. I kind of started the conversation by saying a lot has changed since we last spoke in the summer. You said that the age of general robotics is just around the corner. Is 2025 the year of general robotics, or is that a little premature to your mind?
The development is going gangbusters, as you can see, all the different robots that are going to be around here. And the enabling technology necessary for general robotics is coming together. All the pieces are coming together. The industry still has a lot of engineering to do. If you look long term, pick your horizon in terms of robotics, and our offering to the industry is a 3-computer system. And so whether they're developing the robot, training the robot, we have DGX systems for them and DGX clouds for them. If they're simulating the robots, we have Omniverse for them. And if they want to deploy them, when they're ready to deploy the robots, we have little computers that basically is the computer brain of the robot that they can put inside the robot. And so we'll work with the industry across the board, from the development of the robot to the deployment of the robot. And we have computer systems for them, algorithms for them, AIs for them, and we'll partner with the industry to make this future happen.
Very, very quick. Which line of business grows fastest this year? Data center, gaming, or other?
They're all going to grow fast. I think gaming is continuing to grow. Our autonomous vehicle business is already on its way to be a $5 billion business this year. And so, run rate. And so, the autonomous vehicle business is just starting to get off the ground, and that tells you something about how we address it. And the reason for that is we get the benefit from the beginning of the development of the AIs all the way to the deployment of the cars. Because a car company needs 2 factories, a car factory that builds the cars and an AI factory that builds the AIs for the cars. And both of these areas we get to participate. And so I think it's going to be a very large business.
Jensen, I've made you late for your next appointment.
Yeah, it's great to see you.
Incredibly grateful for your time. It's good to see you as well. Jensen Huang, the NVIDIA CEO.
I made it for my mom. It was actually in honor of my grandmother who passed away last year. I was able to.
Guess what, Carol Master?
What?
I mean, we started the day, markets looked like they were going to finish the day in the red, but as we get closer to the bells, kind of poking back into the green, at least for the Dow and the S&P.
Yeah, rather pokey, right? And almost call it unchanged. I've been looking at some of the energy names and utility names in particular that are in fact impacted by those West Coast fires, Southern California fires. Edison International, man, it is down about 12%, and you've got Sempra Energy down about 2%. So some concerns about, obviously what's going on there and their ability to handle the fires, but also the impact on them as well.
But not much conviction in today's trade at all. I mean, you look at the S&P 500, searching for direction for much of the day, moved between gains and losses, Scarlett, more than 24 times today?
Yeah, well, everyone's waiting for the jobs report to maybe kind of give us some sense of what's to come, but I suspect that won't be until January 20th when you really get a sense of what the incoming president will do with executive orders that will hint at the sequencing of his policy that people will really be able to make some more permanent bets.
I'm still really weirded out by the weakness in the semis. Seemingly sort of out of nowhere. And you look at the moving averages, it's just weird. They're like all converging. It doesn't look really good. It looks kind of ugly.
Yeah, interesting day here in the markets. We talk about quite a few sectors actually in the green, but unfortunately the ones that matter were in the red. The net effect of it all is a market that just going to kind of call this one relatively unchanged. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is going to finish in the green. It's up by about 90 points, but that's only about 0.2%. The S&P 500, which spent most of the session in the red, is going to close in the green, higher by about 9 points or 0.1%. The Nasdaq is going to finish in the red, but only by less than 0.1%. And the Russell 2000, that was your primary laggard, but that was only down 0.5%.
All right, that's your read at the big board. Staying with the S&P 500, guys, despite little changed on the day, you do have about 290 names to the upside, some with some significant gains, Scarlett, and 209 names in the S&P 500 to the downside, also with some significant losses.
Yeah, and if you look at the sector breakdown, very much tilted to the green. You have 8 sectors gaining ground, 3 in decline. But what's notable here is that no sector moved more than 0.75%. Healthcare, materials, and consumer staples each gaining about 0.5%. They're the best performers. The worst performers are communication services down 0.75%. Energy, utilities, basically unchanged at this point.
All right, guys, let's get to some of the individual gainers. Number one gainer.
Are these going to be good, Carol?
They are now.
Stay tuned, TBD. Your number one gainer in the S&P 500 is eBay. This is a good one, finishing the day with a gain of just almost 10% here, rallying after Meta Platforms offered to publish listings from the online auction company on its Facebook Marketplace service. We talked with our Poonam Goyal. She said, just keep in mind, this is a test. So we're going to have to watch to see if ultimately this is something longer term. But right now, investors really liking it, kicking that one up to the upside in a big way. Hey, GE Healthcare Technologies. This was a top gainer in both the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100, a gain of about 3.5%, upgraded to buy over at Jefferies, which encouraged investors to take advantage of a recent pullback in the company's share. They did raise the price target to $103 a share from $95. GE Healthcare finishing the day at $86 and change. And this one, a small cap mention. I might get some digs from Romaine as a result. Accolade, ticker is ACCD, and this share price surging 104%. This is after Transcarent agreed to acquire the healthcare services company for $7.03 per share in cash, representing a total equity valuation of about $621 million. It's just a reminder that stuff's going on. We have a lot of news coming at us from different areas, from DC, from Wall Street, and so on and so forth. But some deals are happening, going in and around the news cycle. That's why I mentioned it.
We've also been watching those devastating fires out there in Southern California, where thousands so far have evacuated. It's having an effect on some publicly traded companies as of right now. Edison International down more than 10%, the worst performer in the S&P 500 on a percentage basis today. It fell today the most since March of 2020. This is a result of what's happening out there in Southern California. Edison International Southern California utility is the largest in the region, though analysts do note that so far there haven't been any reports on utility equipment being involved in these fires. The company shut off electricity to about 136,000 homes and businesses in an effort to prevent wildfires and warned it may need to cut power to additional customers. Shares of Lyft falling by more than 6% today. This after Delta Airlines announced that it would replace the ride-sharing company and link its SkyMiles loyalty program to Uber a little later this year. So the new agreement is going to allow customers to link their Uber and SkyMiles accounts and then earn miles for eligible rides and deliveries. Morgan Stanley analyst Brian Nowak out with a note saying that the loss of Delta partnership poses risks to Lyft's growth strategy and achievability. Rigetti Computing, did you guys see what happened with quantum stocks today? Quantum computing stocks? Okay, this one down by more than 45% and then 40%. Though we should note last year, this stock in particular was up by close to 1,500%.
Oh, wow. Okay, so resetting some expectations there. I'll let you finish today, Tim. Feels like a big moment for me. All right, take a look at the bond market. You're seeing buying in the front end. You're seeing a whole lot of nothing happen in the long end. But there were the levels that we hit that were something. So the 20-year at one point hit 5%. We had that 30-year auction, 4.9% was the yield there. It was a strong bid to cover. The stops were the highest since 2007. It just shows like you hit that number, you hit near 5%, and there are buyers that want to come in for that. So it's going to be really interesting. The bond market is open tomorrow. It closes at 2 p.m. Equities are closed, so definitely watch that space in the long end.
All right. right. One of the things we are watching, or one of the spaces, is out in Vegas, right? CES. Some really cool technology. We're all tech obsessed. On our radar, it's not at CES, but how about some lemon squeezing robots that are saving Chick-fil-A about 10,000 hours a week? Sounds kind of cool.
Yeah, so folks at Chick-fil-A, the folks who work there, were squeezing 2,000 lemons a day. Now they have machines squeezing as many as 1.6 million pounds of fruit, and there's hardly any human help. Makes me think of what they've done at Chipotle over the last few years with the Autocado.
Oh, right, for guac, yeah.
Exactly. Moving the human out of there so then they can focus on other things, and you got the robot making the guac.
You know, this facility is bigger than the average Costco store. You guys know I'm obsessed with Costco, so that's roughly 190,000 square feet. And then it ships all these bags of juices to the Chick-fil-A stores where there is a role here for workers. They add water, they add sugar, and they make the lemonade.
I don't know. Can I just say something? I mean, the way we say it, like robots, it feels like they're like robots that are squeezing lemons, but it just looks like giant machine presses, no?
Yeah. What was that you were just doing?
Robot. For those on radio, they go cool thing.
Like auto plants? Those auto plant robots?
Yeah, but it looks like just a huge, like, presser.
Like an Elon, like humanoid robot, right? Like with hands.
It's not that. Yeah,
stuff.
exactly.
Well, speaking of robots and speaking of technology, CES is showcasing a lot of smart dashboards, a lot of,
No, I really haven't seen that.
He gets a different feed than
This
we
is
do, yeah.
advanced civilization, right? Our kids are. I want to be my pets when I go.
Okay. I would just like my dog to stop eating the Christmas tree off the floor. How about that?
Apparently, you can go there. Maybe there's a machine that can help them do that.
All right, we could go so many different
Yeah,
places.
mental health counseling for that.
All right, guys, that's a wrap. Across platform, radio, TV, YouTube, Bloomberg Originals. We call it the closing bell. We will see you again, same time, same place tomorrow.
In the past 2 decades, China has built
business with you.
Global Gateway will mobilize 300 billion euros till 2027.
Now the US and Europe are answering back with their own infrastructure initiatives to counter China, but African experts are skeptical.
At the end of the day, China has been that guy around the corner with, a bouquet of flowers to Africa, the US, Europe and the UK have time and time again said, be careful of the flowers you see out of the window, they have thorns on them.
In Ghana, the handover of power from
and Dar es Salaam port in Tanzania. At the time, it was the longest railway in sub-Saharan Africa, allowing Zambia to ship copper, bypassing White Rule Rhodesia and South Africa. It also gave China much-needed political allies.
Beijing said, we have problems, you have problems, we will help you out. And they backed on this. And this is really some of the early seeds that China sowed in Africa that later, came to clearly define the divide between the West and the East as far as China's involvement in Africa is concerned.
In the early 2000s, as China looked to expand markets and political influence abroad, its investment in Africa ramped up.
The Chinese said, well, guess what? We are the best in the world now at producing large-scale infrastructure fast and cheap. And we have a surplus of capital. So we'll loan you the money. We have our great contracting companies. We have all of this skill and all this ability to deliver fast and cheap. And in that sense, it was really an ideal match. They recognized what Africa's development stage was, and they said, you know what? 30 years ago, that was us. We recognize a lot of what's going on here. You don't have enough infrastructure. You have a large population that's growing quickly. Also, let's not underestimate there is a shared history here of anti-colonial struggle. So you tick all of those different boxes, and Africa made a lot of sense for the Chinese to come in.
China is currently involved in an estimated 35 African countries and has made significant contributions to their infrastructure, including ports, railways, and power plants.
It's estimated that China has invested more than $340 billion in Africa. So compared to how much China is investing across the world, this may not be as much, but for Africa, it's a lot of money because of the huge infrastructure gap that Africa faces.
But there are noticeable differences between Chinese financing and how the West lends.
Lenders like the World Bank and the different agencies, they're shareholders of countries, and they're required to publish their lending and activities just to be transparent. They don't have any choice. On the other hand, when you come to commercial banks, then you'll see a very different case. And that is, banks often are under a duty of confidentiality to their clients. I think the Chinese banks are no different.
But the rush to give out loans by the Chinese has meant some of their early investments weren't as profitable as projected.
So when China stepped into the field, it was much welcomed by the developing world that there would be increased financing for infrastructure. However, with the rush to get projects off the ground, to put them into action and to begin construction, critical due diligence was often left by the wayside. Financial sustainability, social and environmental sustainability assessments kind of never were done, or were done haphazardly, or were simply not transparent or available to the populations. What this has ended up causing is states to take on projects that they initially thought were affordable, but unfortunately, they've been now saddled by debt.
China is coming for its pound of flesh in Uganda.
In 2021, the Entebbe International Airport in Uganda came under fire after local media reported that the airport would be taken over by China.
We call this a debt trap.
After closer examination of the contract, it was found there was no debt trap, and both sides have denied that the airport is in danger of a takeover.
I think there is an assumption that certain governments are not able to look after themselves, or they're either not sophisticated enough, or they're just simply too corrupt to look after its own interests. I think in my personal view and experience, that just simply hasn't been true.
Experts say more should be done by borrowing countries to make sure loans are more favorable to their interests. But the Chinese argue that the risk level is higher in African countries and greater repayment assurances are needed for loans that might not otherwise be available.
Certainly in my 20 years of experience, I've never seen a case where the Chinese bank would just say, look, don't read this, just sign the dotted line. In fact, they will spend days and days and they're sitting with us, going through every line of the document, making sure the other side understands, because they know in 10 years' time, if they don't explain this clearly, this is going to come back and haunt them.
Certainly, there are issues with how China finances projects. There are issues around transparency, but I don't think this is some sort of grand master plan from Beijing in order to ensnare developing countries into debt and become further beholden to Beijing.
In Kenya and Nigeria, debts to Beijing are growing. These include Kenya's $3.6 billion railway from Mombasa to Nairobi, which reportedly lost $200 million in 3 years of operation, and a $1.3 billion loan from the China Exim Bank to fund Nigeria's largest infrastructure project, a 157-kilometre segment of the Lagos-Kano Railway.
The government itself can't afford to finance these things. The private sector isn't really stepping up. The West has not got an alternative program, so therefore China is the only game in town, and the terms of the loans are reasonable. At the same time, you have members of the National Assembly, particularly from the main opposition party, vocally criticizing the government for what they perceive to be a lack of transparency around the management of the loans from China. They often articulate this worry that you hear in other parts of Africa that China will try and seize Nigerian assets in the event of a default by the Nigerian government.
But looking closer at Kenya and Nigeria's total public debt, it doesn't appear that China's in a position to use the debt it's owed as leverage.
In Kenya, Chinese loans account for about 10% of the country's $70 billion total debt. And it's even less acute in Nigeria, where the Chinese debts are just about 3 to 4%. So again, we have to focus on the data as it is, not as these narratives and these storytelling, which we have these fantasies that Kenya is going to be taken over by the Chinese. one country cannot control another country just by owning 4 to 10% of its debt.
Only a handful of countries on the African continent have a significant amount of debt owed to China, and most of them owe much more to private bond markets.
Africa does not have a Chinese debt problem. Angola weights about a third of all Chinese debt in Africa. So take Angola out of the issue, then you have an even less serious problem in that respect. So it's very important that we narrow down this problem to be what it is.
But it only takes one bad deal to affirm Western fears. In the Democratic Republic of Congo, a controversial method of borrowing based on future natural resource revenue has meant some projects have fallen victim to corruption.
Congo has a very, very significant mining industry. It's Africa's biggest producer of copper. It's by far the world's biggest producer of cobalt. Cobalt is a key ingredient in the rechargeable batteries that power electric vehicles. You hear politicians talk about Congo saying that we are to cobalt as Saudi Arabia is to oil. However, up until now, at least, the benefits to government revenue and the benefits to the population at large have been rather limited.
In 2008, China and the Democratic Republic of Congo agreed that Chinese companies would finance $3 billion worth of infrastructure and build a $3.2 billion copper and cobalt project, whose tax-free profits would repay both investments. China, with the help of these mines, has now come to dominate an industry at the heart of future technologies. And leaked documents reveal millions of dollars that flow from Chinese entities, including the multi-billion-dollar mining project, to the family and associates of Congo's then-president, Joseph Kabila.
If the example of Congo applies elsewhere, these companies operate with a real deliberate lack of transparency. And if they find a willing partner in a government, as they did in Joseph Kabila's government, this lack of transparency can extend to and really envelop the relationship between the state and these mining companies.
There is a lot of anxiety in the West over China's involvement anywhere really, because it's a strong number two to the US. And being a superpower and China having very strong links with Africa, setting up a lot of logistical supply chains in Africa, preparing to expand its trade and take it to the next level is worrisome, because whatever happens in Africa or whatever happens in Asia ultimately can affect the world order. There's a lot at stake.
Ideology may also be on the line. Countries that receive help from the US or European multilateral development banks often require values that fall in line with democratic nations.
Anti-corruption, good governance, transparency, participation, inclusion. These are things that really matter. We should want projects that are beneficial to the populations, that don't negatively affect them. And so while it may hinder the US in being able to lend to certain countries, I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing.
When countries in Africa take help from China, they're expected to side with or at least not participate in the condemnation of China on key issues including Taiwan and allegations of forced labor in Xinjiang.
On these sensitive red line issues, and Taiwan is certainly one of them, this is where the political relationship becomes more evident and much more important. Africa, more than almost any other region in the world, tends to vote as a bloc in major international organizations and tends to express itself as a group, if not the whole continent. And again, this is the political symbolism that's becoming increasingly important to China from a region like Africa that is so important to the Chinese, much more so in many ways than the resources, which again aren't as important to China simply because they can buy the resources now from any number of other places. But getting this kind of political support is very important in today's geopolitical environment.
We want to show that a democratic, value-driven approach can deliver on the most pressing challenges.
While the US and Europe haven't attempted to try and match China's investment on the continent, they have started work to offer alternatives. The EU's Global Gateway aims to supply 300 billion euros globally between 2020 and 2027. And Build Back Better World, or B3W from the US, aims to address the infrastructure needed in developing countries.
Democracies are messy. Things take time in democracies. So while authoritarian regimes such as China are able to speed up the process, or able to get things done quicker, that doesn't mean it's of a better quality. And I think that's really where the US and others, and through the B3W initiative, can really make a difference, is by actually developing and building high quality infrastructure.
We believe in the nations of Africa, in the continent-wide spirit of entrepreneurship and innovation.
Yet skeptics of US and European-led projects say they're aimed at specifically targeting Chinese influence rather than working with African countries as business partners. And they lack specific information that have many wondering whether or not they'll result in significant action in Africa.
When you talk to the Chinese, they will tell you that we have come a long way with Africa, both culturally and economically. We have had similar problems as Africa, and we want to help them grow because they were in a position where we were. In Africa, the Africans will tell you we need the money. We have a huge infrastructure gap. And it doesn't matter whether the money is blue or red, as long as it can do the job, we will accept it. When we talk to some of the economists that follow China and the African governments, they will tell you that there has been benefit for these projects overall for Africa. How they have been done, the terms, as well as how these projects have been got, is another story.
Congo Holdup is the biggest leak of data in the history of Africa. More than 3.5 million documents of financial data that comes from a bank called BGFI show the world what's been happening.
Just because Workday makes you great at finance and HR does not make you a rock star.
Tim, you are a rock star.
Excuse me, Tim, do you have a platinum record?
Technically, no.
Welcome back to Squawk Box. Joining us right now, first on CNBC for her exit interview, is FTC Chair Lina Khan. Chair Khan, thank you for joining us. We've been talking to you now for 4 years. This is, we get eight more days before it's over.
That's right.
Business days before it's over. I want to talk about the last 4 years, the way the business community's thought about all of this, the way the business community's thought about you, the way you thought about them, and all of that. But I want to start, before we even get to sort of looking back on this last 4 years. I don't know if you just saw the news that came out this morning from Facebook's, from Meta, around community notes. They're going to effectively get rid of their policing, if you will, of content on their own. And they're going to move parts of their team to Texas from California. There's a whole sort of move afoot. Also, just yesterday, Dana White joined the board of Meta. And the reason I'm even mentioning this is I wonder whether you look at that and this effort by some of the tech companies and others as a rebuke, if you will, of what you and the FTC have been trying to do over the last 4 years.
Well, Andrew, it's so great to be here with you. And look, what the rules are for speech online is an enormously important question. And a world and an economy in which those rules are being set by a single company or even a single executive is deeply at odds with why we have the antitrust laws and the anti-monopoly laws, right? I mean, this is an economy that has thrived when we have fierce competition. And I've heard a lot of concerns, including on both sides of the aisle, about what happens when you concentrate control and have gatekeepers over who gets heard and who gets to speak.
So it sounds like you'd be a fan of what Meta's doing then.
Well, look, I think we should have an economy where the decisions of a single company or a single executive are not having extraordinary impact on speech online. And I know that's a concern that we hear
bipartisan members of Congress talk about, and so it'll be interesting to see what happens. We, of course, have litigation ongoing. There's going to be a trial starting this spring, FTC versus Facebook, alleging that their prior acquisitions were illegal.
What do you think, though, of the relationship that we're seeing between big tech and the next administration? What do you make of the meetings and pilgrimages with which we're seeing Mark Zuckerberg go to Mar-a-Lago, or we're seeing a Jeff Bezos or a Tim Cook? I mean, this is a very different kind of relationship than the administration, the Biden administration had, and specifically what you represented to the business community.
So I approached my job with a focus on faithfully enforcing the law and making sure we were doing that across the economy without fear or favor. There has been, as you know, a lot of concern about dominant digital gatekeepers, again, on both sides of the aisle. And even as we've seen the president-elect announce some of his future appointments, he's noted that he's making these appointments with a view that they're going to continue to maintain a tough line against some of these big technology companies.
Do you think they are, given the meetings that we're seeing, given the $1 million donations to the inaugural? I mean, on a very personal basis, you know, there's only 8 business days left in your role. What do you make of that?
Well, I can't predict what future people in my position are going to do. It is true that the FTC has been very successful, including in its ongoing litigations against Amazon and Facebook. And so it's only going to be natural that those companies are going to want to come in and see, can they get some type of sweetheart deal, right? Can they get some type of settlement that's cheap, that settles for pennies on the dollar, and lets them escape from a liability finding in court?
Do you see that happening? Is that what you think is happening?
I hope it won't, but again, I can't predict that. And we are set to go to trial against Facebook this spring, against Amazon in fall of 2026. Of course, they would want a sweetheart deal, and I hope future enforcers wouldn't give them that.
You mentioned Amazon. That's a company that just made a documentary deal with Melania Trump. What do you make of that?
Well, look, I think in general, our economy, including our tech sector, has done best when we've had open, competitive markets, right? We have an economy that has traditionally shunned the centralization approach that other countries have taken. We've had an economy where even incumbents have had to look over their shoulder.
No, and I know you're talking in a very sort of academic way about this. I'm asking from a very practical perspective and a personal perspective, given the approach that you've taken, what you think is going to happen over the next 4 years, and to the extent you've seen these meetings taking place and you've seen the rhetoric in the business community. By the way, you've seen the number of deals that that you keep hearing about, a sort of massive pipeline that's already started. What you think of that? People even saying, I'm going to do the deal now because guess what? Lina Khan's not going to be in the job in 2 weeks.
So there's no doubt that under this administration, we took a more rigorous approach to enforcing the law. And we've been vindicated in court time after time, right? I mean, just a little over a year ago, we introduced new merger guidelines. We've now had over a dozen courts cite those guidelines as persuasive authority. There used to be a view that even blatantly illegal deals, for example, could be cured by a divestiture of a hodgepodge of assets, even if that wouldn't create a competitor. We rejected that view, including in the